All right. So anyway, my name is Chapu. Okay, so let's talk about the comparative anatomy for the uteruses of domestic animals. So focusing on the dog, horse, pig, chicken, and then cow. Right. So anyway, introduction. Basically, we need to understand the classification of uteruses that we have. So number one is what we call the simplex uterus that we find in humans. So we know the structure of the human uterus. Then number two is the biconate nucleus. That is the one that we see in most of the animals that we'll be talking about. So the biconate is whereby you have a uterus that has a body and two large horns, right? So actually a body and two horns, right? And then it actually be having my oviducts. So there'll actually be my oviducts, but actually the uterus will be having two horns, right? And then one common body and then one common cervix, right? And then we have what called the bipartite type of uterus. This is whereby there are actually two horns and actually two bodies now, right, with a single cervix, right? So here we won't talk much about that because, I mean, for the animals that we're focusing on now, they have the biconate, right? And then we have other types that is like the duplex uterus, whereby you actually have got two horns, two bodies, and actually two cervixes, right? So that's basically classification of uteruses. And the classification, if you look at that, it actually shows the stages that are seen in formation of the highest form of the uterus, which is the simplex uterus in human. Remember, we have two paramesonephric ducts actually fusing distally, right? And the point of fusion extending cranially actually, right? So the fusion of the paramesonephric ducts actually that then later on give rise to the oviducts, right? The uterus and the cervix as well, right? So let's talk about this, how phylogeny basically recapitulates ontogeny. So we see that the structure of the uterus, basically, along the evolutionary hierarchy, shows the various stages of embryological development, like we've just been saying now, right? So now focusing on this biconate uterus, right? So focusing on the biconate uterus, we see variations generally, right, between the types of the biconate uterus in the animals that I'll be discussing about. So this is what we'll see. So number one, you can see whereby the biconate uterus actually has a relatively large body. So it actually will be having a large body, right? And short, poorly developed uterine horns, right? So here the body is large and long, right? And then here we have the short uterine horns. And this is seen in the horse, for example, in the horse. And this is due to the high degree of paramesonephric duct fusion, right? So can you see that? So with the horse now, on top of the horse now we put the humans. That's when we have the highest degree of paramesonephric duct fusion, so that we have small horns actually of the human uterus, the cornu of the uterus. Then number two is the moderately developed uterine horns as in the cow. So this is like moderate fusion actually. So in the cow, the ewe and the goat arise due to intermediate degree of fusion, all right? Then obviously we're expecting the third one to be long uterine horns. So this is whereby we have long uterine horns and a small uterine body, as seen in the dog and the pig, right? And this actually arises due to low degree of fusion of the paramesonephric ducts. So in conclusion, they saw that there's something that is common as we look at this. They said that actually this varying degree of paramesonephric duct fusion reflects the species differences in the number of offsprings, right? So those that actually have one offspring, right, actually give birth to one offspring, what we call the monococcus species, actually have short horns, right? Like we have seen in the horse, right? Short horns, right? And then we see the polytoccus animals actually have much longer uterine horns. much longer uterine horns. For example, the one that we're seeing there with the dog and the pigs. All right. So if you actually reproduce one offspring, yes, you will have short horns, and if you reproduce more, right, yes, you will have longer horns. So that's basically an observation that was made at that point. So looking at the general shape of the uterus now, this is what we can see. The uterus is composed of horns, a body, and a cervix, right? And from the ovary are oviducts, right? And the oviducts would be joining with the horns, then the horns will be joining with the body, then the body will be joining with the cervix. So along my discussion, we will actually see differences either in the size of the horns, the size of the body, and the size of the cervix, either by length as well. We'll also be talking about that. So there we see that looking at this picture, this model generally, we have this body at this point, right? We have a body and we have two horns, right, at this point. Two horns at that point. And there we have the junction between the uterus, right, and the oviduct, right? So that narrow one is actually then the oviduct, all right? So in humans, we have fusion at this point, such that we have that simplex type of the uterus. Then from there, we have the cervix. And in some animals, you may actually see that the cervix, the junction between the cervix and the body of the uterus may not be so clear, actually. All right, so there we appreciate the uterine body, right? So here is the cervix, the uterine body, right? The horns and the fallopian tubes at this point, and then the ovary, right? Then let me talk about this here. The same thing that happens to show different stages of development with these animals. We also see it when we talk about the ovary, because it's important for me to talk about the position of the ovary, because that also reflects the structure and the orientation of the horns as well as the fallopian tubes in different animals. So we all understand that the ovary is actually developing from the genital ridge in the upper lumbar region. And they are supposed to descend, or not supposed to descend, but actually in humans, they descend downwards to lie within the pelvic region, right? But we actually see that in certain animals, for example, the dogs, their ovaries do not move, actually. So we still have ovaries located in the upper lumbar region. Then we have some animals whereby there is mere movement of the ovaries, for example, in the horses, right? Then in other animals, there is intermediate movement actually of the ovaries, for example, the pigs. Then in other animals, there is full degree of movement actually from the upper lumbar region to the pelvic region. For example, the cows, all right? So we still see that. So in animals whereby you still have the ovaries located in the initial position where there was the genital ridge, you see that the fallopian tubes will be facing anteriorly as well as the horns. But if the ovaries are coming downwards, right, coming downwards towards the pelvic region, you actually see that you have the bending actually of the horns as well as the fallopian tubes. For example, this one. That means that these ovaries actually migrated from the cranial region to the caudal region, and the fallopian tubes basically following the gonads. And let's start with the bovine uterus. So with the bovine uterus, actually, this is what we see. So this is the cow, right? So the uterus actually is short, right? So actually it is a short uterus, right? And actually that uterus, the body of that uterus actually is short, right? And let me explain this part. And it's approximately 3 centimeters in length, right? Then apart from the body, there is a structure that is also now called the pseudo body. So from the pseudo body, you then move on to the horns. All right. Now, this is what will be happening. So from the body, let me use this picture at this point. So in some animals, this is what we can see. like in the bovine, you have the two horns here. But actually the two horns actually they'll be separated, but they can be tissue that will be covering the proximal part of these horns, right? So you can have some connective tissue covering that part. So on inspection there, right? So Anesu, so on inspection there, this is what you actually be seeing. It will seem as if the body is actually large or actually long, but actually the body will be short, right? And small, right? So actually the body will actually be short, right? So this is what we're saying. I don't know what's happening with my screen there. Anesu, what are you doing there? All right, anyway, fine. So so ndikona mani kina waisa pa screen, the green stuff. All right. So anyway, we say in the proximal parts of the uterine horns will actually be covered by connective tissue, and it will seem as if they
no.